Adam, thanks for showing me why I should keep the volume levels under 0 dBFS. I don't experience any unexpected clipping now, but still, my tracks sound different depending on where you play them. What do you mean? I finished another track, and on my way to school, I listened to it through my headphones. It sounded great. The screech I added was so powerful. When I met Sarah, I wanted to show her my new track, and I gave her a headphone. But for some reason, she insisted on using her Bluetooth speaker. I connected my phone to it and played the drop I liked, but to my surprise, the lead was basically gone. How is that possible? I mean, you could hear it, but it was too quiet in relation to the kick drum. So I told Sarah that on my headphones the lead is much more upfront and maybe her speaker is just broken. I just don't know why my track sounded so weak through that speaker. Have you ever heard of a mix mono compatibility? It tells how well does your mix translate to mono devices. Your headphones, car speakers, studio monitors can play your track in both stereo and mono, while Sarah's Bluetooth speaker or some poor sound systems in a club play only a mono sound. If you want your track to sound good whenever you play it, your mix should sound powerful in both mono and stereo. But that's not possible. Every track when played in mono sounds less powerful than the same track in stereo. Yes, Lucas, you are right. Whenever you add, for example, a chorus, a reverb, or a ping-pong delay to your track, these effects are adding the stereo width to your track. That stereo width is something a mono speaker can't play, so it's natural that your mix will sound less huge. But if you play your track in mono, and suddenly the low end disappears, and important instruments get much quieter, then I would say your track isn't mono compatible, and that's a mistake. You're right. The lead sound that was supposed to be big after the drop was so quiet in mono. So you want to say my mix wasn't mono compatible? How to change that? One of the easier things to improve that would be to adjust the volume levels and stereo widths of your sounds separately. Let me show you an example. Let's say your drop sounds like this. You have a mono kick drum and a very wide lead sound. Where did you get these sounds from? I got them from the Hard Techno Reinforcement Volume 1 Sample and Serum preset pack. Anyways, you can hear the lead sound is very wide. It also has some reverb on it. If I use on this lead utility, I can isolate for you the part of the lead that makes it so wide. That's a lot of stereo width. Exactly. When I play a stereo mix of that beat, the lead seems upfront enough. But what if I play the mono version of it? Let's load the utility on the master channel. The lead is much quieter than the kick drum, just like in my example. Yes. Before I added the utility on the master channel, you listened to mono kick drum playing with the stereo lead sound. That stereo lead had both its mono components and a stereo one. But I would prefer to call this mid signal and side signal respectively. When I added the utility on the master channel to switch the mix to mono, we got rid of the side signal from the lead, leaving only the mid one. So, turning this knob fully to the left is equal to turning on the mono switch? Yes. I think I get now why my track sounded bad when played in mono. You see, I wasn't ever using this mono switch, so I was mixing my track in stereo all the time. I was adjusting the volume level of the lead in stereo and I thought it's loud enough in relation to the kick. But if I understand well, it's the side signal, or the stereo width, in other words, that gave me the impression the lead was loud enough. Oh yes, and that's why when you played your track in stereo, everything sounded okay until you played it in mono. So, what's the solution? Should I mix my track in mono all the time? That depends on the producer. Someone... Wait, who's that? Yo, can you hear me? I just wanted to say that personally I prefer to do most of the work on the mix in mono because I can adjust precisely the volume levels of all the instruments. I can also equalize and compress them in mono as well. And when most of my work is done, I switch back to the stereo mix. At that point, I'm sure that my mono mix sounds great, so if after switching to the stereo one, something sounds off or weird, I know that the problem lies in the stereo image itself. Also, Lucas and everyone else, if you would like me to mix or master your track, you can hit me up on Instagram. Let's have a talk. Lucas, you don't have to work like that. Some people do 80% of the whole mix in mono, but some mix in stereo from the beginning and they check from time to time what does their mix sound like in mono. And that's fine too, because in the end, you just want to be sure your mix sounds good in mono. Let's return to Ableton now. We learned that in our simple beat, the lead sounds loud enough only when played in stereo, and that's because of the huge stereo image. But in mono, the lead is quieter than the kick. When I was listening to that beat in stereo, I set the volume of that lead to almost minus 22 decibels. Let me now use the mono switch and readjust the volume of that lead. Now, to make my lead sound good in mono, I had to increase the volume by almost 3 decibels. Okay, but now if you switch your mix back to stereo, the lead will be too loud. Let's see that. Yeah, you are right. The lead now covers the kick drum a bit. So now you know the problem lies only in the stereo field. What you can do now is to use the width knob. I will use another utility for convenience to make the lead more narrow. And everything is now fixed. That sounds like a lot of work. Plus, it's confusing. Adam, you said it yourself that only poor sound systems play music in mono, so why should I care? If my music sounds bad on their speakers, it's on them. I don't know if you know, but the better your mono mix is, the better your stereo one is going to be. You could hear how much information there is in the mid part of the lead sound, so when you played your lead in mono, and how little information there is on the sides of that lead, so when you turn up the mid side knob all the way to the right, for example. Because of that, I personally would prioritize the sound of the mono mix over the sound of the stereo one. Adam, give me the remote access so I can show you something. No. Then at least turn off the mono switch from the master channel and show Lucas the difference between the stereo mix of your beat. When you adjust the lead sound volume in stereo and when you adjust the volume of the lead sound at first in mono and then adjust the stereo width separately. Okay, I will create two groups and switch between them. You see, Lucas, if you would like me to teach you more about hard or industrial techno production, you should check out my drillmusic.com website where you can learn more about my private music production lessons. Free consultations are available as well, so you should book one now to discover what you should learn most. Now, let me share my screen to show you another example of why, for me, it's better to adjust the volume of the instruments in mono at first, and then to adjust the stereo width separately. Quite a long time ago, I made a track that has in beat some mono sounds, like the kick drum, but some sounds are also very wide, including the pad and the bass sound. Using the same approach Adam showed you a few minutes earlier, I adjusted the volume of the instruments in two ways. At first, I adjusted the volume levels while listening to the mix in stereo. In the second way, I turned on the mono switch on the master, adjusted the volume levels, turned the mono switch off, and adjusted the stereo widths of each instrument. Let's compare at first both mixes in mono. As you could hear when I was adjusting the volume levels in mono, I made the pad sound loud enough, and the bassline in the beginning is not louder than the kick drum. But when I adjusted volume levels in stereo, the bass is too loud and the pad too quiet. Now let's compare both mixes in stereo. When you adjust the volume levels and width separately, you do two different things, but when you adjust only the volume levels in stereo, you do only one thing. What if you adjust both volume levels and stereo widths when listening to the mix only in stereo? Maybe the mix would sound even better, or maybe not. When listening to the stereo mix only, it would be difficult to say whether an instrument is too upfront in the mix because of too high volume or too high stereo width. This leads us to the end of the second episode of Basic Mixing Mistakes. Also, what did we cover here today can't be considered a very bad mistake. In this tutorial series I had to talk about the mono compatibility issues. There are a few other reasons that could prevent your mono mix, from sounding great, but today we will wrap things up with this simple volume adjustment tutorial. In time, we will surely cover more advanced problems.